Alright guys, welcome back again to more Witch on the Holy Night. How are you all doing? Hope you all doing alright out there in the world. If anything, I'm doing alright and I'm pretty excited to come back to this. So if anything else, I hope you all continue to enjoy. Thank you all for the love and support. And let's get right into it. Alright everyone, welcome back.
霊的進化論の二次創作スピリチュアルダイアリのまがいもの。
ああ、スウェーデンボリー。そんなの今更読んでも仕方ないんじゃない？
新書なら退屈だけど、これは偽書だから。彼の欠点と長所を劇的に褒め上げている。よくできた冒険小説のようよ。立ちはだかる秘密組織の名前がカントとか気が利いているわ。筆跡はあなたのおじいさんのものだけど。
へえ、あの人そういう趣味まであったんだ。割とユーモアがあったのね。
Aoko seemed nostalgic over her now deceased grandfather.
あなたのおじいさん、夏に便りをくれたけど。
よしてよ、死んだものと考えたいのに。
Aoko sighed and laid back on the sofa. The soft cushions caved in under her weight.
話は戻るけど。
Alice shot a glance at Aoko. Her body buried in the sofa remained as still as a corpse. It was clear Aoko had tuned out the conversation. Alice silently chastised her with a look. The more she thought about it, the less important the events of the day seemed to become. If she just ignored Alice, the conversation would end there. They would eventually get up and leave today's mistake unresolved for another day. However, that's not the kind of person Aoko Aozaki was.
いいわよ。何？
She asked, still lying down.
今日できなかったのは少し痛いわね。
だから反省してるって。学校優先は一人前になってからでしょ。
ならいいけど。
The coldness in her voice made Aoko gnash her teeth. She knew what Alice wanted to say. She knew better than anyone. The veneer she wore for school was different than the way she lived at home. While it could be called hiding in plain sight, Alice thought it was silly. And what the silence told her was,
覚悟を決めろって言いたいのよね、あんたは。
Today's failure was not a colossal one. She just happened to upset the delicate balance between her home and school lives, choosing one at the expense of the other. And yet, that careless mistake was a clear sign of Aoko's lack of commitment.
アリスは関係ない。これは私が私で決めなくちゃいけないこと。
She had only known for sure for the last year and a half. But she'd had a hunch for as long as she could remember. Make the choice, and the day will come. It was a little wonder that her morals and conscience had been stripped away. Aoko pushed herself back up. She was met by Alice's cold beauty and wordless gaze.
オッケー、アリス。来週中に決着をつけよう。それでいいんでしょ？
ええ、青子がいいなら。
Aoko could not help but shake her head, feeling like she was hearing something similar for the second time that day. Even in the comfort of her own, she couldn't banish thoughts of that country boy from her mind.
じゃあ、下準備はよろしくね。私まだできないし。
場所は例の公園でいい？
妥当な線ね。あ、でももう一軒の方は？そっちの方が急務じゃない？
時と場合、森に変化があれば教えるわ。
After that brief exchange, Alice returned her attention to the book on her lap. Shop talk was over. Now they could return to their normal relationship as roommates. Aoko grabbed the remote and turned on the TV. Since Alice was busy reading, Aoko decided to tune into a variety show that had already started. Alice started to speak but suddenly cut herself off. One of her delicate hands raised to her mouth. She would always cut herself off the second she realized she was about to say something trivial. Sometimes her self-restraint would hit too late, and she would make a gesture like the one she was making now. It occurred to Aoko that the sound hurt, cute little roommate made just now was different than the wah blurted in times past.
何？
Aoko turned down the volume of the TV, her intense eyes lit up like those of a mischievous cat.
どうということはないんだけど。
ないんだけど？
Alice looked away bashfully, not knowing if she could bring it up or not. It was times like these that her expression carried a real warmth and surprising charm. If you could see her in this moment, Alice's father would have to admit that her name suited her perfectly.
今日帰ってくるときおかしなものを見て誰かに話そうと思っていたんだけど。
Aoko nodded, beckoning her to continue.
つまらない本当に意味のないことよ。けどどう考えてもそんなことをする理由がわからない。青子、人間ぐらいの大きな猫がひょこひょこ出前をする理由ってわかる？
I'm pretty sure that's a guy in a cat suit being a mascot and doing a job. For a second, Aoko thought Alice was trying and failing miserably to make a joke again. One would think that about anyone really, but she seemed completely serious. Even if Alice's sense of humor fell flat for Aoko, this story already sounded more fanciful than Alice's usual attempt at jokes. Aoko concluded that her roommate was talking about something she had actually seen.
その話には2つぐらい信じがたい部分があるけど、1つずつ論破していい？
いいの。私もからくりぐらいは思いつくから。ただ理由がわからないから聞いてるの。わざわざ精巧な猫のぬいぐるみを着て出前のてんやものを届けに行くことってそんなに簡単かしらね。
難易度以前にそれをやる人間の常識性を疑うけどね、私は。
Alice nodded attentively at her words.
まあ世の中いろいろあるから、私たちみたいなのもいれば、下界から遮断された山奥で暮らしていたやつまで10人十色よ。私だったら見かけたら声かけて理由を尋ねただろうけど。
Alice's gaze drifted at that.
暮れゆく住宅街にさまよう出前猫か。背景が夕焼けだったらファンタジーだったでしょうに。
I'm honestly gonna laugh if it turns out that it's Sojiro doing that type of job, because there was a point earlier in the story where there was a guy begging him to do something, and it would have been funny if he had to dress up in the cat suit to deliver the food that he needed to do.
で、今日の夕飯どうする？せっかく話が出たし、私らもてんやものにしようか。
Aoko loved getting takeout, and her face glowed as she spoke. They had no hard rules for dinner, but if one of them was in the mood to cook, they made it a point to make enough for two. At the very worst, this meant entire weeks without dinner, but the two of them agreed that this was the system that worked best for them. Whether they found cooking to be too much effort or simply liked ordering out, nights like this one were a common occurrence, much to the chagrin of the restaurants in Misaki Town. Delivering to the mansion meant coming all the way up to the top of this hill, the source of their disgruntlement.
時間は8時前。ギリギリセーフね。私今月がいいな。あそこの月見そば最近ご無沙汰だったし。
The Hungry Student Council president took out their many menus and excitedly looked for anything that stood out. Alice casually responded without sparing so much as a glance.
悪いけど私夕飯済んでるの。
Everything went gray. With those words, Aoko froze. All deliveries required a minimum of 2 items, so she was out of luck without an accomplice. Cruel society had decided it couldn't be bothered to deliver to a princess who only ordered a single serving of food. Incidentally, to counteract orders from the Hilltop Mansion, the restaurants had declared the minimum number of orders would be 3 starting next year. Aoko and Alice were still in the dark to this fiendish change in direction.
この裏切り者！
Why don't you just order for 2 or 3?
だから帰ってくるのが遅かったのね。帰宅部、学校までバス徒歩込みで片道20分のあんたがなんで5時以降に帰ってくんのか考えるべきだったわ。
Unfortunately for Aoko, she had been too out of it to even remember that she was the one who'd fallen asleep.
ああ、ひどい女。そういう時は残された一人のためにお土産買ってくるのが暗黙の了解だったのに。私だってこの前の外食の時はアリスの分も買ってきたじゃない。
It was unknown how serious Aoko was being, but she was visibly angry. She had already woken up hungry that morning, and from the time she was called into school until now, she had consumed nothing but tea. It was a small miracle that her stomach was not growling. She knew it was her own fault, but she persisted, wanting to get revenge on Alice for scolding her earlier.
この前ってあれのこと？あなたが都心に出向いた時、夕食にお寿司を食べてきたのに、お土産はなぜかコンビニエンスストアのビニール袋だったって話
Aoko had kicked the hornet's nest.
何よ、買ってこないよりはマシでしょ。
真実は時に隠蔽すべきね。
Alice's icy gaze pierced right through her. Aoko had certainly crossed the line by going on and on about how the sushi circled around the restaurant while Alice ate her convenience store meal. But new things fascinated her, and she couldn't contain her curiosity towards the conveyor belt sushi shops that started popping up at the time. They were nothing short of miraculous. Even honesty can be a sin, given the right circumstances.
わかった。わかりました。じゃあ今回のは前のと帳消しってことでいいわね。
Alice went back to her book without so much as recognizing the question. The fact that she did not confirm it made Aoko anxious.
仕方ない。今日は薬日だし、おとなしく台所に立って料理の腕を磨くとしましょう。
She stood up, announcing her intent to no one in particular.
あ、聞き忘れてた。アリス、どこで夕食済ませたの？
Alice's hand froze on her current page. She suddenly shut the book she was reading and stood up as if at wit's end. She walked across the drawing room with her book in hand. When she reached the door, she stopped and turned toward Aoko.
聞きたい。
まあ、なんとなく。
Aoko nodded timidly, cowed by Alice's sudden vigor. Alice continued in her matter-of-fact way.
その猫が余ったメニューをくれたのよ。
And with that brief response, she left the room. It doesn't have to be normal. Little happening of last night. Save. Alright, next episode.
「都会は魔界だ。けど慣れれば割と住みやすいとは思う。
Sojiro sighed listlessly. He looked down at the winter schoolyard below, lost in thought. December was written on the corner of the chalkboard. He could not believe 10 days had already passed since he transferred to the school. The last vestiges of autumn had faded with the change of the month. The trees were all but barren, and the ground below them a mat of fallen leaves. Fourth period was classics. An elderly teacher stood at the lectern and rambled on. While he had finally gotten used to the classroom, he still had a long way to go to get up to speed in his classes. Lacking even the basic understanding most students learn in their early scholastic life, it was a battle for Sojiro to keep up. Even if he was unable to grasp all of the content right away, he at least tried to memorize everything in the hope that he could make use of it down the road. Which is why losing himself in his thoughts was about the last thing he should have been doing. He would normally chastise himself for daydreaming, but... Troublingly, he was unable to concentrate in class today. Sojiro could not place the source of his lack of concentration. It could not have been the winter in the city. It was much milder than in the mountains. Neither was his part-time job particularly tiring. He was not any more physically fatigued than the average student, so that could not be it either. Others might conclude that it was because the courses were boring, but that seemed off the mark too. Sojiro did not share his classmates' opinions about their classes. On the contrary, he rather enjoyed his class time. No, his frame of mind was not to blame either. Trying to figure out what was wrong only made him more depressed.
いけない。こんなんじゃ気が散る一方だ。
He scolded himself and turned his attention to the chalkboard. The rhythmic ticks of the chalk were sending him into a slumber, but he somehow managed to resist their lullaby. And yet, he was still unable to focus on the class. Sojiro reflected silently, as was his custom, and sighed inwardly. Deep down, he knew the real source of his agitation. The events of the previous night were the only thing it could be. With the chime to signal the end of class, the teacher bowed and exited into the hallway. To see him off, the 30 or so students all stood up from their desks. The clock, which had seemed to slow dramatically around 11:30, now struck noon. The tension seemed to fade from the room all at once. The release from a difficult lesson was the start of a lunchtime, the highlight of school life. Misaki High's cafeteria was not particularly known for its quality of food. Complaints that the quality was below that of a private school went unheeded, and the same unique flavors appeared on the menu each and every day. Private school prices coupled with subpar quality led the majority of the students to opt for boxed lunches instead. Sojiro's class 2C was no exception. The boys muscled as many as 10 desks into what resembled a long dining table. Conversely, the girls divided themselves into smaller tables of 2 or 3 desks with practice ease and started chatting within their cliques. Not a single student wasted even a single of their precious lunchtime. Not even a second of their precious lunchtime. Where both sides differed in method, they shared a common goal. Sojiro was struck dumb by the efficiency of the transformation. Even after 10 days, he was unable to keep pace with the rest of the class and remained seated where he had sat during the previous period.
Oi! こっち来いよ、しずき!
The voice came from the large makeshift dining table near the window. Hosuke Kinomi was beckoning him over while leaning back in his chair in a way that looked like he could fall backward at any second. He was regularly shot down by others in the class for being lazy and crass, but his earnest nature kept him from getting on anyone's bad side. Though something could be said for not being so forthcoming all the time too.
飯にしようぜ、飯。俺さ、昨日店の残り物もらいすぎたんだよ。春巻きだよ、春巻き。それを見た親父がさ、もらったもんは残すなってうるさくてさ。食いもん、春巻きしかねえんだわ。
It seemed his endgame was to find someone who might take pity on him and trade him for something better. The two of them worked at the same restaurant, so he was one of the few people Sojiro knew before starting school. He was also the reason Sojiro was able to learn the true meaning of the phrase, can't live with them, can't live without them.
お、いいな、しずきも来いよ。今日は待ちに待った缶詰祭りをすっからさ。
ついに結婚するのかよ。誰か冷静になった方がいいんじゃないのか。
バカ、すげえ楽しいってきっと。そりゃパチモン臭いけど、カニ缶とか食い放題なんだぜ。サバ缶じゃなくて。
マジ？やったー！俺も参加する！コンビーフは一人1個？それとも早い者勝ち？
お前な、一人で何個も食えるもんじゃねえぞあれ。うまいのは最初の1個だけだって。
しずきたちが来るならノルマは一人7個に下がるのか。助かるな。
ところで木の実の弁当の中身、なんか缶詰より硬そうじゃね？
The boys usually passed the time by making fun of each other's lunches, but today they were united against a common foe. A pyramid of countless cans stood in the middle of the table. They had all been taken from the pantry of a certain student's house, and the expiration dates on them had all been scribbled out with a marker.
よし、やろうども。各自毎缶きりの用意はいいな。食べるも地獄、残すも地獄。
我ら5次元目の授業はないものと恐れぬ修羅となり、鉄の悪魔どもを平らげん。食材は下町の何でも紹介マーケット中山からの提供です。
ヒュー、バカも休み休み、イエーイ。
The boys united as one and hoisted their can openers into the air.
ほら、しずきも食べようぜ。缶切りならまだあるからさ。
いや、君らの弁当の毒味はごめんだって昨日言ったはずだ。それにその缶詰半分以上賞味期限切れてるだろ
う。なんだよ、釣れねえな。
Quite an inexplicably excited group of guys. Their real motivation seemed to be to spread the pain. But moved by their energy and conceding defeat, Sojiro got up from his seat and joined them. And before he could,
じゃあ私たちが釣り上げようかな。しずきくん、あんなの放っておいて一緒にどう？
another interested party joined the fray. A girl with short but stylish hair had called out to him. She had also tried to get Sojiro to join the track and field club several days earlier.
いや、そっちも遠慮したいな、できれば。
He answered with a troubled look on his face. On their table was nothing but a pile of fruit Sojiro had never seen before.
なんで？パパイヤとか嫌い？マンゴーもあるし、ヤシの実だってあるし、内緒だけど、夕張メロンもあるんだから。
It's the little things, but I like how this visual novel just eased into another scene so seamlessly. The members of the fruit group pumped their fists in unison at the last delicacy.
待て、なんだヤシの実って、あれ食えるもんなの？
あ、マンゴー余ったら回してほしいな。
バカ、肉食え肉。そんなんだから貧弱な体してんだぞお前ら。
Sojiro couldn't keep track of all the voices flying across the room.
わかるのはどっちも破滅的だってことだけだ。
You are a wise man, good sir. That being said, he found it difficult to refuse them outright. His tendency to accept others' goodwill at face value occasionally left him frozen with indecision. Not accustomed to the regular human interaction, he was unable to judge when it was or was not appropriate to turn someone down. Someone tapped the lost little lamb on the shoulder.
ほっとけほっとけ。いちいちここのバカどもに付き合ってちゃ人生台無しだ。適当に流しとけばいいんだよ。ほら、お前らもな、善良な羊を悪の園に引きずり込んでんじゃねえよ。
An inappropriately loud voice echoed throughout the classroom from behind him.
副会長。
Sojiro turned around to see a boy about a head taller than him. His long hair, while unkempt, had been brushed back, giving it an appealingly windswept look. His attractive features belied the contempt for the classroom his eyes carried. Unlike the perpetually dopey-looking Sojiro, he was an extremely attractive boy, capable of captivating anyone who so much as a glance at him. In most cases, such a boy's presence would be met with awe and respect. However,
なんだよ、副会長様のお出ましかよ。
てめえらのバカ顔にはコリゴリだって学食に陣取ってたんじゃなかったのかよ。
へへへ、ここは見ての通りボンクラどもが集う貧民街でございますよ。王子はほら A 組の綺麗どころとカフェでお茶でもしてればいいじゃない。
またしずき呼びに来たのかよ。青子女子といい、飛び丸殿下といい、しずきなんかヤバいことしちゃったのか。
しずきくんは校則違反しないじゃん。ちょっとそれ以外のルール破るだけで。ってことはやっぱり築地くん、青崎に振られてからそっちに走ったって本当だったのね。
they continued to give him a hard time. Sojiro could not help but feel sorry for him. The class vice president, on the other hand, showed absolutely no reaction whatsoever. He glared at them with a bored look and simply raised his voice.
相変わらず無駄に元気があって結構じゃねえかてめえら。そんなに活力たぎってんなら冬季特別清掃班にだって参加できるよな。おい、今んところ自主的に申し出てるのは全校で一人しかいねえんだ。 西全員が参加すりゃ俺も青崎も肩の荷が下りるってもんなんだがよ。
The menacing growl in his voice contrasted greatly with the boy's well-constructed looks. Both Team Canned and Team Fruit's words were doused like a fire being smothered. This was partly due to their fear of the boy, but mostly due to their fear of the special winter cleaning team. Yes, the special winter cleaning team. Joining meant spending part of your winter break cleaning up the old school building in the mountainous rear courtyard that had been neglected by the previous two student councils. It was a form of legalized torture that could potentially ruin 3 whole days of your winter break. And forget about any compensation in the form of extra credits. No, it was pointless volunteer work for a student council project. It was practically a miracle that they had found even a single volunteer.
いや僕らちょっと体弱いんでスミッチョで缶詰食べてますね。
私たちも貧血気味でこうやって果物食べてないと死んじゃうっていうか、冬休みはもう予定いっぱいっていうか。
All of the students but one scuffled away.
よし、昼食はやっぱり静かにやらねえとな。1年坊主の教室より2年の教室の方がやかましいなんて苦情、いい加減にしやがれよ、アホども。
The mob meekly scurried away. Sojiro turned to join them, but as he did,
あ、お前はこっちだ、宗次郎。ちょい顔貸せ。
the hand on his shoulder held him in place.
だよ、生徒会応募。人んちのテーブルマナーまで指図してほしくねえよな。
Kinomi cursed him under his breath to his friends the second the vice president turned to go.
はあ？上等じゃねえか、木の実。いいぜ。お前が記念すべき2人目だ。冬休み、首を洗って待ってやがれ。
Kinomi probably should have kept his mouth shut. The vice president must have heard everything Kinomi said because he gave a thumbs up before figuratively jabbing it in his eye.
はあ？何言ってんですか、あいつ。あれ自主的なイベントじゃん。いくら副会長だって強制はできないですよね。
The problem child of Class C laughed merrily.
そりゃ昨日までの話だ。会長の提案が学校側に受理されてな。本日付で生徒会役員は強制力のある推薦権をもらえたんだよ。特に会長と副会長の推薦は絶対だ。拒否した場合、学校側はともかく青崎が何するか俺には止められねえから、そのつもりでな。
げえ、それ事実上の死刑宣告じゃ。生徒会マジ応募。
Kinomi's terrified shrieking continued behind them as the vice president and Sojiro left the classroom.
お前も大変だな、宗十郎。
あんたも割と暇なんだな、副会長。
The two entered the empty student council room. Misaki High Student Council had the use of 2 rooms. One was a large office specifically made for the student council. The second was an archive room once used as a preparatory office for math courses. As the latter of the two, the walls were lined with densely packed shelves, making an already cramped room seem even more confined. For this reason, it served more as a private refuge to the student council. The 2 students sat across from one another. Tobimaru Tsukiji. He was the son of the chairman of Misaki High School and the vice president of its school council. Like Sojiro, he was in his 2nd year and first met the transfer student a week earlier when the task of looking after him was dumped onto the student council.
副会長はやめろって。クソったれな話だが、俺は所詮会長の犬だからな。
As self-deprecating as his words were, he hardly seemed dissatisfied with the arrangement. He took a snap from his pocket and grimaced at it before taking a bite. The 100-calorie energy bar sacrificed flavor for efficacy, but somehow not enough to prevent him gnawing on it like a piece of jerky.
そうか。でも犬は良くないな、飛び丸。
Sojiro sat in the chair with a concerned look on his face. Alright guys, I'm gonna have to end the video here for today. Thank you all for watching. When we come back, we're gonna continue on with the conversation between Sojiro and Tsukiji, I believe his name is, or Tobimaru. So if anything else, I'll see you all in the next one.